Hello, my name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Executive Talk, those that are watching live and those that are watching on our social media platforms. Before we get into today's show, I want to introduce you to our social media platforms. Follow us on Executive Talk on Twitter, Facebook, and also on YouTube. As you know, with social media, there's an opportunity to actually have a conversation. That's what we like to do, is converse with you here at Executive Talk. If you're listening to it on TV or if you listen to it on Facebook, it's one thing to listen to it, but it's also one thing to ask questions or also engage the audience. And that's what we want to do, is we want to make sure, because some of your conversations are starting to hit others as they're watching the show. As a community program, as a business program, as an emotional program, we want to touch all those areas and make sure nobody's left behind. So please, engage on one of those social media platforms, and one of our promises is that we will make sure that we communicate with you. Again, all our dialogue is always going to be healthy and constructive, and we're going to move forward because that's what God is all about, moving forward. This message that I've been given, if you will, is very, very deep. I feel like every show is very deep because, again, Executive Talk is all about the heart and soul of your business. We're going to touch some areas that are going to be personal to you. So those first-time viewers, this is the time for you to prepare your hearts. And what do I mean by prepare your heart? You know, it's one thing for you to watch a program, and if this program hits you in a certain way, and if your heart's not prepared, what happens is you tend to reject it. And what if that one thing is the thing that's going to provide the emotional breakthrough? That's what we're talking about. So prepare your hearts, and then your mind will be open to what we're discussing here. Just to make sure that everybody understands, as I'm doing these presentations, well, I'm learning as well. These are some of the things I'm accountable for, so you guys are seeing me in full effect as well. But let's go ahead and jump into today's program, and we are starting a new series. We just finished a series, How Secure Is Your Business? And now we're actually entering into a new zone. We did a lot of character work, but these are going to hit your character and also some other developmental moves that are happening in your life and also your business. But we got to hit the personal, because everything in your personal will show up on earth, will show up in your business, will show up in your family, will show up in front of you. So there's always a trail and there's always a trend that's happening with everything. So let's jump into this. And Executive Talk on our show is, are your habits toxic to your business growth? Let me go ahead and repeat that. Are your habits toxic to your business growth? Now, two things are going to happen. Right now, you're going to say, oh, okay, that sounds like a pretty good topic. I'm interested. And the second thing that tends to happen is, wow, you're probably thinking of somebody else that you can think of that has bad habits. You probably just got off the phone with somebody and like, oh, yeah, that person has terrible habits. This show's for them. Let me share it with them. I'm sharing it with you right now. And so we need your attention, because maybe you have some habits that are coming on and that's going on with you that we're addressing. And that's where the Lord is having us look at this time in Executive Talk, is your habits. But as we do in Executive Talk, we want to actually understand where they came from in the origination of habits. And I want to show you something here in the scriptures. And I'm going to start with Genesis. Genesis 1, 3-5. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw that the light was good. And he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day. And the darkness he called night. And there was evening. And there was morning, the first day. Okay? Doesn't really seem like a scripture that goes with habits. But let me go ahead and show you something else here. All the way up until Genesis 1, 11 through 13. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to the various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants and seed according to their kinds, and God saw that it was good. And then there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. So, why are those two scriptures mean anything towards habits and toxic to your business? If we're talking about the origination towards your habits, I want to talk about how God's habits are showing up into today's world. And in the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Year to date, right now, is that still established? Is that still established? That's still an established direction. No matter what's going on in the world today, no matter how crazy things are today, no matter how crazy things were last year or before or the years coming, this is still relevant. It's still part of our lifetime. It's still a habit. Let's go into this here. Seed-bearing plants and trees in the land that bear fruit with seed in it. So the land produced vegetation. So let's think about this when it comes to habits. Have you ever seen a tomato just replicate itself, if you will? You grow a tomato. Has a tomato ever said, you know what? I'm going to be a cucumber. I'm going to produce seeds that produce a cucumber. I'll be a tomato cucumber. Sounds pretty weird. Now, that is very sarcastic, but I'm landing a particular point here. The tomato is habitually going to develop a tomato. It falls in line with how it was produced. Everything God has made falls in line with how it was supposed to work. There's a specific habit that is supposed to work within the morning day. There's a specific habit that's supposed to happen in tomatoes. There's something that is specific that each of these have and that goes with that component in order for it to move forward. It is part of this lifestyle. You can depend on it based on the fact that you can say, I had a bad day. Well, God has already been talking about the third day. Okay? You can say, I have a bad night. Guess what? You're still referring to something that's habitual and that happens in your life regardless. You can always depend on it. And your plans that you make every single day, you're talking about either I'll do that tomorrow morning, or I'll do that tomorrow night. You're pointing towards a plan that you're making based on a habit that's already been established. So I want to make sure that you guys are getting that connection as to how God creates things. This is something that was introduced to me here this week as I was learning and doing this show. So it takes us to Genesis 1:27. After God created all this and make sure that each thing that he created fell in line with the habit, he was like, okay, so he tested on the land first. He tested on the vault. He tested on the sky. He tested on this empty space in Genesis 1 first. All the way up until this point of when he made mankind. Because he wanted to make sure that if everything that he created habitually ran its course, and it became dependable and everything that you can expect out of a habit. So now he created mankind. That's one of the reasons why mankind was made second or made last, is because he wanted to make sure things are happening first before he made mankind, so that way it would fall in the same line. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Okay, so that way, in this place, because God has already seen what he created and seen the habits of what he created, he depended on mankind to actually stay in this same creation. If God created in his image, then he can expect that you will have the same habits as his image. There's an alignment there. There's a habit that there's an expectation there in this relationship. Okay? Because of the creator, everything else was perfect, and all of a sudden, God didn't say, oh my goodness, man, I forgot to give habits to mankind. Oh, goodness. What am I going to do now? I'm sorry, mankind. No, that didn't happen. That was not the conversation. It happened in perfect alignment. In Genesis 3:6-7, this is the fall. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Okay, why is that scripture so impactful? Because in this tree of gaining wisdom, in the tree that they were forbidden to eat from, okay, the tree of knowledge, What happened is when they took that desire and when they ate of that tree, they learned a new wisdom. They gained a new knowledge. They gained something else new that was pleasing to them instead of what was already established for them. They gained extra knowledge that they did not need to consume. It was too much, but they consumed this extra because what they had before wasn't enough. One of the things the enemy wanted to compromise is the habits that they saw God had. God's habits were always working in a flow. Again, just talking about the tomato. It didn't decide to actually mutate and turn into a cucumber. It stayed right in line of a tomato. Okay, the night and day still stays right in line with how it was produced and what it's supposed to do. Okay, you still see the stars, you still see the moon, you still see those things that represent various time frames. And this, again, is all in Genesis. It still happens today. But once mankind fell, we fell for a different knowledge, a different understanding. And in that understanding, there are no rules. There's a different knowledge that we have gained. And so in our fallen ways, we have gained and we're operating in a new knowledge. And it's hard because we're committed to it. But let's go ahead and talk about what we're committed to. So one thing that we have gained as far as the understanding, and again, this is part of that conversation that if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, you can converse and ask questions. If there's anything, but what we've gained is that everything that is created has a habit and a system to it. It is absolute. This is in order for you to function, in order for you to do what you do every single day, there's a habit and a system to it. It's still there. So what has happened to mankind? Has mankind fallen away from its creation and how it's created? No. It's just operating differently. So let's talk about your youth. Okay, this is your family. Let's say it's a family of 3. You can have a family of 4, whatever that looks like towards you. But you're born with ingrained habits. Now, I want you to take that in for a minute. You can say, you sit at the dinner table when all the time, right? You sit at the dinner table with your family, and your mother can say, oh, you chew your food just like your daddy. Okay, oh, you know what? You don't clean up like your mother. Oh my gosh, can you clean up and get this thing taken away and fixed, right? So there's some habits, there's some things that you're doing that you don't even know about, but it's all ingrained inside of you. So in your childhood, and some of the disconnect between your parents and also you as a child at one point is the fact of you guys are watching each other's habits. As parents, one of the biggest conflicts that they have with you in growing up is the fact of they're trying to narrow down your habits and trying to isolate and so you can move forward. But because you don't understand, because your parents may not understand, there's a lot of things going on in you, and you're still trying to establish your own habits. Okay, so that's where the conflict comes from as far as that parent-child relationship. That's part of it. So then John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Now, how is that relevant? The fact is, these are unchecked things. In this household, we laugh at habits. And some of them are very funny. Let's just be real. Okay, that whole analogy when you talk about, you chew your food like your daddy, so on and so forth, that is pretty comical. It's pretty comical until you get older. That's the thing about the enemy. Because we're laughing about it, and because we're not taking it seriously, because again, it is kind of comical, but we take it to the next extreme. We don't really see it as an issue. Because the enemy recognizes that you don't see and understand how those habits actually have turned over, because parents may not know how those habits have turned into their lives and how it shows up. So if you're not understanding as a parent how that shows up habitually, how can you explain it to your child? And if you're able to explain it to your child, are you able to exemplify what it looks like? That's what the enemy is looking for. There's a crack. There's something that's open in this whole unit conversation here that you don't know about and that your parents don't know about, and that's the issue. That's the open door. So why are habits so hard to break? You'll hear this often. Man. And again, no judgment, but a smoker will say, man, I'm going to quit. You know what? That's it. Next month, I am quitting smoking. I'm going to take a slow pace to it. I'm going to quit it. Okay, fair enough. You got your cheerleaders. You got people, holding you accountable. You got all that stuff going on. But guess what? Why are they so hard to break? Well, number one thing that we did not incorporate when it came to these habits is that you're born of the flesh. You are born of the flesh. You're born into a place of your sinful nature. So you are already step one out of the game. You have ingrained habits. So now that you have ingrained habits, you're born of the flesh, and most importantly, this is all you know. There's a catch-22 in life, because a lot of these things you want to deal with. A lot of the times you actually know your habits. You're like, I got to get this thing taken care of. This is absolutely ridiculous. I have to figure this out. So, because it's all you know, there's survival that gets in the way in your day-to-day life, that gets in the way of you actually understanding how this thing works. So you put it aside because you don't think it's going to matter, because today has so many worries and so many things that you need to focus on that you can't really have time to actually deal with your habits. You kind of deal with them as you go. Habits have something to do with your core beliefs. Another reason why they're so hard to establish. There's some core beliefs that you have that attach to your habits. They just start to pop out. Again, if it's ingrained, it's ingrained to something, a core belief. So it's really jammed in there. It is not something that's easy to deal with. It just shows up. But again, if you're just trying to do life, if you're trying to survive, trying to move through it, you really actually don't have time to go back and say, well, let me fix this habit, because you're enjoying life. You're moving on. You're trying to work. You're trying to start your family. You're trying to start a business. You have all these things going. But ultimately, this becomes your presentation to the world. That's the disturbing part. This is where you have a catch-22 in life, because you feel like you're okay. You feel like the habits that you have, you put them aside, but the world is looking at you differently because they have firsthand experience with you specifically. And in that firsthand experience, it may not be what you thought it was. When you're in survival mode, when you put it aside, when you put it aside, you're actually done thinking about it. Something about human nature is when you don't understand something, when it's hard to do, you kill what you don't understand. And what do I mean by kill it? Let's put it to you like this. Oh, shoot, what's the answer to that problem? I really got to figure it's really, you know what, whatever. I killed it because I don't understand it, I don't know the answer to it, and I don't want to look dumb. So I put it aside. That's the same thing with habits, but at the same time, you're still presenting something to the world. Okay, you see the collision course in the picture that I'm painting? That's where habits start the collision course on your future. Now, because you're born in the flesh, because these habits have a system to it, the enemy loves the fact of, you know what, I'll deal with your habits. I got you covered. Because right now, if I'm going to destroy you, how about, you know what I'll do? And this is if I was the enemy. Let me see. How can I destroy John over here? Got it. The acts of the flesh are obvious, right? God said the acts of the flesh are obvious. So the sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and that alike. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Okay, good. So, number one, I can destroy their relationship with God because they won't inherit the kingdom of God. So that means the relationship is done. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll reallocate that person's habits, John's habits, and I will get him caught up. I'll have him a good habit of, let me see, let me look at the menu here. I want him to have fits of rage. I want him to have a habit of jealousy. Oh, you know what, sexual immorality, that is so easy. So I'm going to get him caught up in sexual immorality and also a little bit of hatred and selfish ambition. He doesn't know it. He doesn't understand the word. So let me just go ahead and put those things and let me consume them with those habits. Because if your habits are in the flesh, you are ultimately going to operate in one or all of those at one time, just on different days. Some days they all collide together. Some days it's different. But that's the destruction on the enemy. That's how he sees the hole that you missed. Once your habits are committed to the flesh, you will have the presence of effectiveness, but ultimately become very ineffective. I want you to digest that for a minute. You'll have the presence of being effective, but ultimately being ineffective. Now, Maurice, I'm a millionaire, you know. How do you figure I'm ineffective? I want you to think about it. There's a lot of ways to become a millionaire. Did it come biblically? How did that process get there? Because if we skipped over our habits, there is a lot of our habits that we have a presentation to the world over. You're still leaving a mark. These are still happening. You don't get to skip over life. Life is just happening in a different way for you. Just because you got to the top, does that mean you spiritually got to the top? That's the key to the show. That's the key to understanding this whole thing when it comes to habit. It's bigger than just money. You can have the presence of effectiveness because busy work is a new phenomenon. But if you're operating in jealousy, if you have fits of rage going on, you have another operation going on. You haven't gone anywhere. You can become very ineffective because guess what? Your habits have a way of slowing you down, don't they? Your habits have a way of having you go forward and all of a sudden figure out a way to sabotage yourself, doesn't it? I want you to think about that. The flesh habit statements, I'm bored. I don't want to do that. It seems hard. It seems too hard. I don't have time to. I'll try next time. Do you know I can create a habit of trying to next time? Let's put it to you like this. Working out. Working out. I don't have time to work out. Do you know my schedule? I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. But your body has time to get sick. Your body has time to actually do some things, so you don't have time to do that. But you're right, though. You don't. Because that's what you created. It's your habit. You can create a habit. You can actually have time, but do so much busy work and find excuses. And guess what? Your habit is you'll never have enough time. Let's try this on for a second. I'll try next time. Meaning there's some fear somewhere. So with that fear, the habit is, you can have a habit of trying things next time. Well then, every single year we have New Year's resolutions. Are you a resolver? How can you be a resolver? How can you be so effective, but then you keep on trying everything next time? What if you have a habit of, I don't want to do that? Maybe you're just closed off. Now, I understand there's some particular things you don't want to do. I'm a fan of not doing some crazy stuff, absolutely. But there's a habit of not wanting to do stuff that are effective for you because you actually don't want to work out. You actually don't want to work. You actually don't want to work that hard. There's a habit of being bored. You can not even move and not do the right thing and say that you're bored. And find something that's going to entertain you. There's a commitment somewhere else. So the habit is always floating around, and it's floating around in your statements. You can tell that you have bad habits based on your history with relationships. If you're constantly going through battle after battle, do you think your habits have something to do with that? I bet they do. The mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the spirit is life and peace. Because the mind of the flesh is hostile to God, it does not submit to God's law, or can it do so? So guess what? Now you have a hostile mind. Do you think the enemy's going to tell you, hey, that's a bad habit. You need to stop that? No. There's a habit in the system that goes with everything. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take the ships as an example. Although they are large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and itself is set fire by hell. You've already speaking death into your life. That tongue of yours, but habitually, you can actually speak death into your life. Bad habits are hard to detect. I want you to think about that. We're going to come into the next show and keep this momentum going. Because as you can tell, when it comes to habits, there's a ton of stuff to talk about. Okay, this thing is a very heavy topic, and I say that all the time, but it's very real. Please look us up on Facebook and also on YouTube and also on Twitter, and we can keep this conversation going. But in the meantime, I actually have to get back to work. Have a good day.